Hello, and welcome to Biology 107, or Introduction to Human Biology. So here what we'll do is we'll do Chapter 1. We'll go through Chapter 1, get Chapter 1 lecture taken care of, and then we'll move on to the next link you could do on the website for the next chapter, and you'll progressively move through just like that. So let's talk first Chapter 1. Chapter 1 takes us into the study of life. Now here we could see when we talk about this chapter here, first what we'll do is we'll start off with the characteristics of life. Now first I'd like you to know that life is found just about everywhere on planet Earth. Okay, life is going to be found just about everywhere on planet Earth. Now the variety of life on Earth is going to include humans, butterflies, trees, birds, mushrooms, and even giraffes we can see here. Now, the variety of living things, will range in size. They will range in size from bacteria, which is too small to be seen with the naked eye, all the way up to giant sequoia trees that can reach heights of hundreds of feet. Now, the diversity of life is so vast, yet all living things have certain characteristics we'll see in common. These characteristics help us distinguish living things from non-living things. Now, when we talk about living things, we'll see there's a few characteristics that are going to be found in relation to living things. And we'll go through and we'll check these characteristics out. So when we talk living things are going to generally be organized. So when we talk organisms, which are living things, organisms are organized. Organisms can be organized in a hierarchy of levels. In trees, humans, and all organisms, atoms join together to form molecules, such as DNA molecules that occur within cells. Now, when we talk about a cell is the smallest unit of life. It is the smallest unit of life. It's the smallest unit of life. So here we could move forward, and here we could see basically the first characteristic, which is organization. Here is the hierarchy we can see in both, we said, trees and humans. Along with that, all other organisms as well. Atoms, we said, are going to join together. So here we could see how atoms are going to come together and they form molecules. We said like DNA molecules, protein molecules, water molecules, right? So then these molecules we're going to see eventually going to come together and they give rise to, we said, cells. Cells, we said again, are the smallest units of life. And some organisms, I want you to know, are single-celled. Now, in multicellular organisms, a cell is the smallest structural and functional unit. It's basically, as we said, the smallest unit of life. For example, okay, here you can see nerve cells in humans, plant cells in trees. Now here we can see plant cells and nerve cells again. So an example, a human nerve cell that we see here is going to be responsible for conducting electrical impulses to other nerve cells, and it helps to make up the nervous system. After cells, then, we can see the term tissues. Now, when we talk tissues, I'd like you to know this term is a term that describes a group of similar cells that perform a particular function. So this term describes a group of cells. It describes a group of similar cells that perform a particular function. Now, nervous tissue. Nervous tissue, we'll see, is going to be composed of nerve cells that are going to transmit signals to all parts of the body. It's also going to contain other cells that are going to maintain those cells' health. So when we described the term tissue, we said this term tissue describes a group of similar cells. So those ganglia, along with the neurons, are going to make up nervous tissue. So here in nervous tissue, you can see they're showing you two different neurons. But along with that, there's a lot of other cells inside of there also. And then here we could see leaf tissue made up of a whole bunch of different cells also. The next term we have is the term organ. When we talk organ, organ is a structure that's going to be made up of several tissues. So here, several tissues join together to form an organ. Several tissue types join together to form an organ. Now, when we see, we're going to break our bodies down into four primary tissue types. We're going to have epithelial tissue, we're going to have nervous tissue, we're going to have connective tissue, and we're going to have muscular tissue. Our body gets broken down into one of these four tissue types. So when we talk about an organ is going to be made up of two or more tissue types. So again, we said organ, several tissues join together. Two or more tissue types come together to form an organ. Now, when we go through and we talk, so organs are going to work together to form then organ systems. For example, we'll see in the nervous system, we have the brain. The brain sends messages to the spinal cord, which then sends them through to the body parts, through spinal nerves. Now, when we talk about complex organisms are a collection of organ systems, basically. So here you can see the tissues came together to make up an organ. So the brain is made up of epithelial tissue. We'll see it's got connective tissue. It's got we'll see more or less of each tissue type. However, we'll see at least two primary tissue types will be here. When you talk the blood vessels are going to have the muscles. Muscles then make up the third tissue type. So you can see how then the brain is considered an organ. When we talk skin, okay, compare the quantity of connective tissue to skin or epithelial tissue to skin, that's going to vary. However, skin is also an organ because it also contains epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, right, and nervous tissue. Here in the brain, obviously, nervous tissue is going to be the one dominating. So organs are going to be made up of two or more tissue types. Now the quantity will vary when we go from organ to organ. Now when these organs come together, they make up organ systems. So here you can see we've got the nervous system. Now this nervous system made up of that spinal cord, nerves, okay, and then the brain, and they're all going to work together. Now if we talk cardiovascular system, right? We've got the heart, we've got blood vessels, okay? Next then here we're going to see, let's go through and let's talk about how then the nervous system or a cardiovascular system, right, are just basically two systems amongst a whole bunch of other different systems there as well. We're going to see there's an integumentary system, reproductive system, pulmonary system, right, and so forth. Okay, next factor, let's talk about, next characteristic here we could talk about is going to be that organisms are going to acquire materials and energy. Organisms will acquire materials and energy. So we can see that second characteristic right inside of here. Now, we'll see plants, such as trees, they use carbon dioxide. They're going to use carbon dioxide, they're going to use water, and they're going to use solar energy to make their own food. Humans and other animals, they acquire materials and energy by eating foods. Foods such as this red apple we see in this picture, where this young man is eating the apple, and this young man is eating that apple because this apple is going to provide nutrient molecules to the young man. Those nutrient molecules, then we'll see, are going to be used by the cells of his body. The cells will use those nutrients as building blocks for energy. What is energy? I'd like you to know energy is defined as the capacity to do work, right? It's defined as the capacity to do work. Cells are going to use energy from nutrient molecules to carry out life's everyday activities. Some nutrients even provide energy for reactions which build proteins. Cells need energy to do work. It's very important. Cells need energy to do work, and it takes work to maintain the organization of a cell as well as an organism then. So organisms, we could see, they need external material and energy sources to maintain their organization and carry on life's activities. And then we defined energy. Organisms reproduce. Organisms reproduce. So here you can see reproduce. So we'll go through each of these through the slides. Organisms reproduce. Life comes only from life. Life comes only from life. The information encoded in genes within each individual's DNA contains instructions that are going to direct organismal reproduction and lots of other activities as well. Let's talk how organisms reproduce. Life comes only from life. Now, the information encoded in our genes, and we'll define the word genes in a few seconds. The information encoded in genes within each individual's DNA contains instructions. And these instructions are going to direct organismal reproduction, which basically means to make more of itself. Now, before reproduction occurs, DNA has to be replicated. DNA gets replicated so that way the exact copies of genes are produced. DNA contains the hereditary information that directs cellular functions and also life's activities. Unicellular organisms, they reproduce asexually simply by just dividing. Now there, the new cells have the same genes as the single parent. Multicellular organisms reproduce sexually, and each parent contributes 1/2 of their genes to their offspring. I think I wish I could reproduce, like unicellular organisms. The reason why I say that is, you can save on having to look for a partner, buy them flowers and chocolate, and then, entice them to sleep with you, and then, hopefully you can sleep with them, and when you mate, you can contribute your genes, and they can as well. And that's all if. Unicellular, you don't have any of that. And also, what does the world get? Exactly more copies of me, not half of me's, in a sense, just a funny way to kind of remember the difference there for you between unicellular and multicellular organismal reproduction. Okay, so life arises from life. And we said genes are going to contain information. So genes are units of information within an individual's DNA. We've got a chapter dedicated to just genes, DNA, and genetic information. Next term, reproduction. Reproduction, then you can see here, is the process by which an organism makes more of itself. DNA is important because DNA is going to direct cellular functions, and DNA is going to be duplicated prior to an organism reproducing. And we'll see all of that when we get to the reproductive system, another system we're going to talk about, where you're going to see our sex cells. In our case, we're males, so our sperm is going to have cells that have only half of our genetic information. And then the female's egg cells are going to contain the other half. And that's our sex cells. When we talk about our epithelial cells or our neurons, these cells, right, they're going to contain full genetic information. And we'll talk about how the differences we have between our sex cells, basically, and our regular cells when we get to that as well. Next thing here, let's talk about how organisms respond to stimuli. Organisms respond to stimuli. Organisms respond to external stimuli by moving towards or away from a stimulus, such as the smell of food. Let's say you drive home, and you get home and you park, and you park right next to the kitchen window, and you smell something yummy being cooked. Right? Your response there is going to be to quickly get out of the car and get inside and see what's being cooked. But let's say you get home and you smell something that you don't like. Right? You put your belt back on, and in and out, here I come. Okay, so that's just one example. Organisms are going to respond to external stimuli by either moving towards or away from the stimuli. So you smell something you like, nice perfume, right, or cologne. You move towards it, right? Where is this coming from? Oh, I want to know. It smells good. I want smell more. You smell something you don't like. Oh man, I'm getting out of here. I don't like the smell. Okay, so either moves you towards or away from the stimuli. No, when we go through and we talk movements in animals, including humans, is dependent upon their nervous system and musculoskeletal systems. Now, when we go through and we talk, then you can see behavior is going to be directed towards avoiding the injury or acquiring food or mating. So here you could see then, okay, as we said, we'll use nervous system and musculoskeletal systems. Organisms use a variety of mechanisms for movement in response to stimuli. And then movement of an organism constitutes a large part of its behavior. Behavior is directed towards avoiding injury, acquiring food, or mating. Next, then, we'll see organisms are homeostatic. Organisms are homeostatic. Homeostasis means staying the same. So when we talk homeostasis, Homeostasis, we'll see, it basically refers to the requirement that organisms maintain a relatively constant internal environment while the external is changing. So staying the same. The internal environment of an organism stays the same. For example, you'll see human body temperature slightly fluctuates throughout the day. Also, the body's ability to maintain a normal internal temperature is going to be dependent on the external temperature. We will die if the external temperature becomes too hot or too cold. Next, I'd like you to know organisms grow and develop. Organisms grow and develop. Growth, which is an increase in the size of an organism or in the number of cells. And it is a part of development. When we talk development, development refers to the changes that take place from conception to death. All organisms undergo some form of development. Here in this figure, figure 1.4, it illustrates that an acorn progresses from a seedling before it becomes an adult oak tree. So here, figure 1.4, it illustrates that an acorn progresses to a seedling before it becomes an adult oak tree. In humans, development includes all the changes that take place, we said, from conception to death. First, the fertilized egg develops into a newborn, and then the human goes through childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and aging. Development also, I want you to know, includes repair. It also includes repair that's going to take place following an injury. That's also considered development. Next, I'd like you to know organisms have the capacity to adapt. Organisms have the capacity to adapt. We'll see as the environment changes, individuals of a species, which is defined as a group of organisms that can successfully interbreed and produce fertile offspring. So again, when we talk, organisms have the capacity to adapt. I want you to know as the environment changes, individuals of a species, which I defined as a group of organisms that can successfully interbreed and produce fertile offspring, may possess certain features that make them better suited to the new environment. Now, individuals of a species that are better adapted to their environment, they tend to live longer and produce more offspring than other individuals. This differential reproductive success, called natural selection, it results in changes in the characteristics of a population through time. When we talk population, I want you to know is defined as all the members of the species within a particular area. You'll see during the nearly 4 billion years that life has been on Earth, the environment has constantly changed. Some individuals, we said, of a species may be better fit in a new environment. Survival of the fit, as they say. And adaptations are going to be features that make individual organisms better suited to the new environment. And then individuals that are better adapted to their environment are going to tend to produce more offspring. And then we said natural selection is going to be basically the differential reproductive success of adapted individuals. And it's going to result in changes of characteristics of a population over time. And then we use the word evolution. Evolution is talking about the change in frequency of traits in populations and species. Now, when we go through and we look at the classification of organisms, here we'll see living organisms are assigned to groups based upon their similarities. Because life is so diverse, it is helpful to have a classification system to group organisms based upon their similarities. We have this term systematics. Systematics, I want you to know, is the discipline that identifies and classifies organisms according to specific criteria. Each type of organism is going to be placed in a domain, in a kingdom, a phylum, a class, an order, a family, genus, and finally, species. So let's talk domains. When we talk domains, domains are the largest classification category. Domains are the largest classification category. Now we'll see, based on biochemical and genetic evidence, scientists have identified 3 domains. Scientists have identified 3 domains. These 3 domains include, number 1, the domain Archaea. Number 2, the domain Bacteria. And number 3, the domain Eukarya. Now, both domain Archaea and Bacteria have, so both domain Archaea and Bacteria contain unicellular prokaryotes, which lack a nucleus, a structure that is going to be, you'll see, bounded by a membrane. So again, both domain Archaea and Bacteria contain unicellular prokaryotes which lack a nucleus, they're going to contain unicellular prokaryotes which lack a nucleus. And it's going to be found, we'll see, in the cells of eukaryotes. It's going to be found, this nucleus is going to be found in the cells of eukaryotes. So it's found in the cells of eukaryotes in the domain Eukarya. In the domain Eukarya. The genes of eukaryotes are found in the nucleus. They're found in the nucleus. Prokaryotes are structurally simple but metabolically, they are quite complex, we'll see. The archaea, they live in aquatic environments. They live in aquatic environments that lack oxygen or that are too salty, too hot, or too acidic for other organisms. So we said the domains archaea and bacteria include unicellular prokaryotic cells, which are cells that lack a true nucleus. However, the domain eukarya, which includes eukaryotic cells, are going to be cells with a true nucleus. Genes found in the DNA within the nucleus. So that's why the nucleus is going to be important for eukaryotic cells. So when we talk archaea, we said archaea are going to live in aquatic environments that are going to lack oxygen or too salty, too hot, too acidic for other organisms. Now when we talk bacteria, bacteria are going to be found almost everywhere. They're going to be found in water, they're going to be found in soil, in the atmosphere, okay, on our skin, and also in our bodies. Now, when we talk bacteria, although some bacteria cause diseases, others are going to be beneficial. They're going to be beneficial both environmentally and commercially. For example, we'll see some bacteria are going to be used to develop new medicines. Some bacteria are going to be used to clean up oil spills. Some are going to be used to purify water in sewage treatment plants. So some is beneficial while others may cause disease. Next then is the kingdoms. Now we talk kingdoms. Scientists are in the process of deciding how to categorize archaea and bacteria into kingdoms. Eukaryotes are currently classified into 4 kingdoms. They're currently classified into 4 kingdoms. And these 4 kingdoms you can see here include, first kingdom we have is the kingdom Protista. When we talk Protista, kingdom Protis, this can be unicellular or multicellular organisms, and some can also make their own food, which then we call photosynthesizers, while others then must ingest their food. Next then we have the kingdom Fungi. Our fungi, which are next, and among them are familiar molds and mushrooms. So fungi will include molds and mushrooms that, along with bacteria, are going to help to decompose dead organisms. So very important for the environment. Next then is plants, kingdom Plantae. They're going to be well known as multicellular photosynthesizers. And then fourth we have kingdom Animalia, animals. They're multicellular and ingest their food. Multicellular, and they have to ingest their food. So we talk Protists. Protists can be unicellular or multicellular, and some can make their own food while others have to ingest their food. Fungi, this will include, we said, molds and mushrooms, and they're going to be important because they're going to help to decompose dead organisms. Plants, multicellular photosynthesizers, and then animals. That includes us. Multicellular, and we have to ingest our foods. So here you can see protists, fungi, various types. Same thing with the various protista, and same thing with Plantae, and then various animals. Archaea, bacteria, and eukarya, the three kingdoms. Three domains. Archaea, domain bacteria, and domain eukarya. So all three domains. Eukarya, we saw the various kingdoms. So category of classifications: domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Going from most inclusive down to least inclusive. And then you can see classification of humans. So domain eukarya, kingdom animalia, phylum chordata, class mammalia, order primates, family hominidae, genus Homo, and species Homo sapiens. Next on, let's move down to scientific names. Let's talk taxonomy. Taxonomy, I want you to know, is a field in systematics that assigns a binomial or a two-part name to each species. For example, the scientific name for humans is Homo sapiens. Right, we just saw that a few minutes ago as well. So taxonomy is the assignment of a binomial, two name basically, to each species. So first we'll see genus name and then the species name. The genus name is capitalized and both words are going to be in italics. We talk peas, garden peas, garden peas. You see here, we've got Pisum sativum. And then here we can see Felis domesticus, cats, home cats. The first word is the genus to which the species is going to belong to. And the second word is the species name. The second word then you can see is the species name. And I want you to know here as well that both words are going to be in italics, but only the genus name is capitalized, as I told you before. The genus name can be used alone also. It can be used alone to refer to a group of related species. So genus name can be used alone to refer to a group of related species. Also, a genus can be abbreviated to a single letter if used with the species name. So for example, Homo sapiens can be abbreviated to just a capital H period and then sapiens. So we move to 1.3. 1.3 takes us to the organization of the biosphere. I'd like you to know the organization of life extends beyond us individuals to the biosphere. We talk about the biosphere. We're talking about the zone of air, land, and water on Earth where living organisms are going to be found. And now individual organisms are going to belong to a population. And we defined population earlier. And we said population is going to be basically all the members of a species living in a particular area. So it includes all the different populations, all the different members of a species within a particular area. And then we have the term community. Now when we use the term community now, here we're using this term in reference to talking about all the different populations in the same area. They make up then what we call a community. And in a community, you'll see you have organisms interacting with each other and also with the physical environment, forming what we call an ecosystem. Forming an ecosystem. Next then, the processes of science. Now, when we talk about the process of science, here first let's talk about defining biology. Now, when we define biology, biology, I'd like you to know, is the scientific study of life. It is the scientific study of life. Biologists can be found basically anywhere studying life forms. Biologists are going to perform experiments either in the field or in the lab. Biologists and all scientists generally test hypotheses using the scientific method. Here we can appreciate that scientific method. Now here, when we talk about the scientific method, we'll see the scientific method is going to include a few steps, and we'll go through each of these different steps. Now here, when we talk about the scientific method, you can see it'll include the first process of making an observation. Now when we talk about observation, basically you'll see is going to be something that the scientist can either see or smell or is able to appreciate, basically. Now when we talk observations, I want you to know scientists, they tend to be curious about nature and also how the world works. They believe that any type of natural phenomena can be understood better by observing and studying them. So scientists are going to use all of their senses to make observations. For example, we observe with our nose to smell dinner. Our ears we'll use to observe when a piano needs to be tuned. Scientists also can extend their ability of their senses by using instruments. For example, our eyes, we can put microscopes in front of our eyes, and these microscopes are going to help make better observations. Scientists, they also expand their understanding by taking advantage of the knowledge and experience of other scientists. They may even look up previous studies in scientific journals, or you'll see scientists may even attend scientific meetings and hear presentations. Now, the vision of the scientific method is that observations help lead to hypotheses, and then they lead to eventually experimentally testable predictions. This way, we can evaluate new ideas to arrive at accurate conclusions about processes. So in observations, new observations are made and previous data is studied. And this then allows us to move on to the next step, which is formulating then a hypothesis. We talk about hypotheses, so we'll see after making observations and gathering knowledge, a scientist is going to use inductive reasoning to come up with the hypotheses. When we talk about a hypothesis is an educated guess, or we can say a tentative explanation for the natural events. Past experiences we'll see, and observations are going to influence the formation of a hypothesis. Now, the hypothesis has to be testable, and it has to even be falsifiable. So if we say, okay, I've made observations, and I think this machine that's supposed to cut the grass, when it cuts the grass, it will cut the grass at a height that won't be too tall and a height that won't be too short. So now we have to be able to go and test that. So we have to be able to then, get the machine and, run the machine over the grass. And, and it has to be falsifiable. So that machine can go and cut the grass too short. I think it might cut it at a perfect height. Okay, but so I'm saying that hypothesis I'm making is false. It can be falsifiable too, right? If it cuts it too short or if it cuts it too high. So again, when we talk about hypotheses, the hypothesis has to be testable, and it even has to be falsifiable. Next, then we'll actually do the experiment, and we'll make further observations. So then testing a hypothesis, it involves either conducting an experiment or making further observations. Now, scientists are often going to use control groups. They often will use control groups for which they already know the answers to compare results and sometimes use models to test breakthroughs. For example, we'll get a group of 100 people. To 50 people, we'll actually give the medication that we're going to be testing. We're not going to let them know. And then to the other group of 50, we're going to give them a water pill. They think is the medication. And then we're going to see the results. So that's the experiment. So once we do the experiment, we make further observations, and then we can come up with a conclusion. And we talk conclusion, here the results are analyzed. Here the results are analyzed, and the hypothesis is either going to be supported or rejected. So here we're going to say, okay, the hypothesis I made was right, or it's rejected. The scientific process is continuous. And in biology, scientists are discovering new things all the time. So once a conclusion has been made, then we can formulate a scientific theory. When we talk scientific theory, you can see many experiments and observations are going to support a theory. We can say, all right, you can go and do this yourself and you'll see the results are going to be exactly what we have here. Sometimes some people falsify information, and scientists will actually go and try to do an experiment, and the answer, or the conclusion is incorrect. It's wrong. And then they actually contact those people from the study. They tell them, hey, what did you guys do here? We're actually doing your study and we're not getting the results you got. What did you do here that we're not doing? Or did you not put information in here that I'm supposed to do? If not, please tell me what I'm supposed to do and fix that. So you can see here, very important process, the process of science. So observation, hypotheses, go through and understand each of these. Experiment, further observations, we said. Further experiments and observations. Formulating data. Coming up with a conclusion. And then formulating a scientific theory. And then we talked about the controlled study. All right, that concludes the first chapter.